Imagine driving home, and within minutes, everything grinds to a halt. Transport collapsed, supply lines failed, and thousands were left stranded in freezing conditions. It quickly became a desperate battle for survival as entire industries collapsed under the weight of the brutal storm. Survivors thought they'd never see anything like it again. But just a year later, an even worse storm hit, proving how catastrophically unprepared they really were. This is the story of the blizzards of 1977 and 1978, and how they brought America to a standstill. On the morning of January 28th, thousands of Buffalonians were on the move when a wall of snow swept across New York State. Authorities knew a powerful Arctic cold front was racing across the country, but its severity caught everyone off guard. In just a few hours, drivers were struggling in knee-deep snow. Temperatures had already plummeted to below freezing, and hurricane-force winds tore through the city. With the town unraveling, the National Weather Service issued an urgent blizzard warning, and citizens wondered how the situation had declined so quickly. What no one realized was that the conditions of this storm had been building for weeks. Buffalo had already seen more than 150 inches of snowfall through December and January, most of which lay frozen on the ground in compacted layers. It was one of the coldest winters in U.S. history, with snow even falling in Florida for the first time. Under such frigid conditions, Lake Erie had frozen earlier than usual, allowing a huge amount of snow to settle across its vast surface. So when the sub-zero Arctic air reached the area, its gusts began lifting nearly 10,000 square miles of snow inland towards the city. And with winds expected to last for 13 hours, everything in its path was going to be buried under layers of snow. By the afternoon, the skies over Buffalo had darkened. Winds were consistently gusting at 70 miles per hour, and the storm was only at the beginning of its forecasted peak intensity window. Alarmed citizens left work early, trying to reach their children's schools and inch home on roads which were becoming blocked by snowdrifts.
It was a blizzard. It was a wall of white snow. You couldn't see anything.
You couldn't survive 5 minutes in the conditions that we operated in.
With visibility near zero, driving was impossible. Public transport shut down, and authorities closed the roads to all traffic except emergency services.
If you are already on the Niagara section of the thruway, stay in your car. Police are trying to reach you with snowmobiles and with cars and whatever if they can move, but or on foot. But don't panic, okay?
But it did little to help. Snow was piling up faster than roads could be cleared, and vehicles became trapped where they stood. Thousands were abandoned across the city, and the combination brought the city to a total standstill. By early evening, emergency responders were stranded along with everyone else. Then large parts of the city were left without emergency coverage. And as darkness fell a few hours later, wind chills dropped as low as minus 50 degrees Celsius. It was now a life-or-death scenario, and people scrambled to find warmth, sitting in their cars with their engines and heaters running en masse. Since snow blocked most outlets for exhaust fumes, it prompted urgent warnings from local authorities.
If you're going to leave your motor running, make sure that you watch out for carbon monoxide poisoning. Leave your window open a crack to get some fresh air in. If you feel tired or nauseous or you smell exhaust gases, open your window, but just relax.
But soon, that wasn't a concern at all. Cars began to stall in the freezing conditions, leaving motorists trapped without a source of heat. With no other choice, they attempted to reach safety on foot through the storm. The situation became so desperate that every hotel room in the city was booked out, in some cases by people who were only a few minutes' drive away from home. In a matter of hours, Buffalo had completely shut down. And since local authorities had no way to deal with the crisis, Governor Hugh Carey declared a state of emergency. The National Guard immediately began mobilizing and arrived the next day to relieve the city. As they worked to regain control, it became clear Buffalo wasn't alone. Although New York was hit the worst, cities across the Great Lakes, from Ohio to Pennsylvania, were brought to a standstill as the storm crippled entire transport networks. The winds had raged all through the night, burying major arteries under feet of snow. With interstate highways and rail lines disrupted, deliveries of essential supplies, including food and fuel, were cut off. Across the region, hundreds of thousands were left stranded in cars, workplaces, and public buildings, praying to be rescued.
I went to work on a Friday and I didn't get home for about 2 weeks.
But the most critical failure came from the rivers. A 180-mile stretch of the Mississippi River froze over, bringing one of the country's most important shipping routes to a halt. Hundreds of barges carrying fuel, chemicals, and essential supplies were left stranded in the ice, cutting off key supply lines across multiple states. With no quick solution, it was unclear how long fuel deliveries would be delayed, and the disruption came at the worst possible time for reasons beyond cold weather. Natural gas was in short supply throughout the 1970s. The country could only maintain limited reserves, even before the harsh winter arrived. And now that supply routes were cut off, it pushed an already stretched system to the breaking point. Faced with a looming crisis, authorities began urging people to reduce heating and conserve energy, even as temperatures remained dangerously low. And even with the reduced usage, millions of people were now at risk of losing heat in one of the worst blizzards on record. Over the next few days, the human toll began to mount. Many suffered from frostbite, and even minor injuries became dangerous without access to medical care. The period was haunting for workers clearing the roads. They discovered numerous people had frozen to death inside their cars, or died of exposure on foot, likely after becoming disoriented in the whiteout. In downtown Buffalo alone, around 13,000 people had been stranded, and it raised fears that thousands of people would perish across the region. By February 1st, communities across the region were stretched to the breaking point, and for some, survival now depended on the actions of others. One of the most heroic acts was carried out by Patrolman Carl O. Reese of the Buffalo Police Department. Despite suffering from chest pains, Reese braved the harsh conditions to deliver life-saving medications to around 220 people seeking refuge at a restaurant. Making multiple perilous trips between the restaurant and the emergency hospital, he ensured that crucial heart medication, insulin, and other medical aid reached those in need. After tirelessly working for 25 consecutive hours, Reese suffered a fatal heart attack just as the storm was beginning to ease. More than 60 people lost their lives as a result of the blizzard, and the scale of the disaster was so severe that President Jimmy Carter declared several counties federal disaster areas. As the region began to recover, people slowly returned to their daily lives, believing the worst was behind them. But it wouldn't be the last time they faced a storm of this scale. A year later, another severe winter storm swept through the Midwest and northeastern United States. Only this time, it was far more destructive. Labeled a perfect storm, it was a once-in-a-generation convergence of several weather systems, combining intense snowfall, hurricane-force winds, and freezing temperatures into a prolonged and devastating blizzard. It was forecast to be at its worst between January 25th and 27th, and authorities urged people to prepare. Unfortunately, after weeks of storms, many no longer took the warning seriously.
We knew the night before it was coming. They had had a warning about 10 o'clock at night, a blizzard warning, but they say that a lot, so we weren't really prepared for it.
This time, the storm dumped up to 3 feet of snow across multiple states, and violent seas battered coastal areas at the same time. The scale of the disruption was unlike anything seen in the year before, as huge stretches of America were nearly impassable for a week. The gridlock was so severe that both the Red Cross and the National Guard were deployed to deliver emergency aid and food, set up shelters, and rescue the stranded. And just like in 1977, natural gas was already in short supply. But the situation was made worse because the winds destroyed power lines across multiple states, leaving thousands without water, electricity, or heat for days. Those same winds also drove powerful storm surges inland across the New England coast, wrecking buildings and flooding entire communities. When the blizzard finally began to ease, thousands of homes had been damaged, with losses to property and infrastructure totaling $1 billion. It was a scene that the National Guard compared to the aftermath of a nuclear attack. As the storm's fallout unfolded, reports began to emerge of those who had lost their lives. Tragically, this included a 1-year-old child who froze to death after a heating stove used to heat the family's mobile home failed. He was one of nearly 100 victims of the storm. The back-to-back blizzards exposed just how vulnerable the country was to extreme winter storms, and their impact contributed to President Jimmy Carter establishing the Federal Emergency Management Agency the following year to better coordinate the nation's response to disasters. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing. It's helping a lot.